The stars had always been silent observers, distant pinpricks of light that humanity admired but never feared. That silence shattered the night the warning came. Across every frequency and every language and code humans had devised, a single message pulsed through space. Not just a warning, but a declaration. Earth was marked as the next target. The sheer enormity of it didn't sink in at first. It sounded like the plot of a story, something from old sci-fi movies. But then the first ships appeared on the edge of the solar system, ships that weren't just alien, they were unlike anything humans had ever imagined. Sleek, impossibly fast, and bristling with energy that bent the laws of physics as we knew them. On Earth, panic spread faster than the signal itself. Nations scrambled their defenses, but their weapons were laughably inadequate. Satellites were vaporized in moments. Missiles evaporated in mid-flight. The people who had once looked to the sky in wonder now stared in terror, realizing that the vastness of space held more than mystery, it held judgment. Among the chaos, a small group of scientists and military strategists gathered in the command center beneath the Capitol. They were the only ones who could attempt something desperate, something that might stop the annihilation. Their leader, a calm and determined figure who had studied patterns of cosmic phenomena for decades, scanned the endless streams of data, knowing that one miscalculation could mean extinction. Then it happened. A transmission unlike any other arrived, coming from somewhere deep in the void. It wasn't in words humans could understand. It wasn't even a language as we knew it. The signal pulsed with a rhythm that seemed alive, resonating not just through receivers but somehow through the minds of those listening, and then, impossibly, the ship stopped. Mid-flight, mid-attack, as if the very will of the universe had pressed pause. Scientists stared at the screens, hearts pounding, unable to explain what had just occurred. The weapons that had moments ago seemed unstoppable now hung frozen in space. Something had responded to that transmission, something that even the alien forces feared. Questions began to multiply faster than the panic. Who sent it? How had it reached across the vast distances of space with such precision? And why had it worked when everything humanity tried had failed? The transmission was brief, almost cryptic, and yet its effect was absolute. Entire fleets, moving faster than the eye could track, now hovered silently as if waiting. And somewhere deep in the signal there was a pattern, a code that seemed meant for humans or perhaps meant for something much larger. The team at the command center realized that this wasn't just an opportunity. It was a test, a puzzle whose solution might decide whether the Earth survived or became just another extinguished spark in the cosmos. Outside, the skies that had always been a source of wonder were now a stage for tension no one had ever imagined. Families watched satellites flicker and vanish. Cities lit up with emergency alerts. Even the most skeptical citizens could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was not alone, and the stars themselves were now active participants in the fate of our planet. The transmission had stopped the attack, but it hadn't explained why. Nor had it indicated what would happen next. The alien forces were still out there, frozen but patient, like predators sizing up their prey. And humanity, for all its ingenuity, had only a few fragile threads of hope left. As the scientists scrambled to decode the signal, they began to notice something even stranger. Hidden within the pulses was a pattern that seemed almost intentional, like a map or a warning or a message specifically designed to reach them. And as their screens filled with numbers and symbols that defied conventional understanding, one truth became undeniable. This transmission was not just a lifeline, it was a key. A key to survival, to knowledge, and perhaps to understanding forces in the universe that had never been meant for human comprehension. But with every moment, the alien fleets could awaken, and the fragile pause could end. Humanity was holding its breath, staring into the void, waiting for the next move, while the stars themselves seemed to watch with bated silence. In that silence, the unspoken fear grew. Had the transmission truly saved them, or had it merely postponed the inevitable? And as the team worked feverishly to understand what had just happened, a single realization chilled them to the bone. The universe wasn't just observing anymore, it was listening. And whatever was listening had already made its judgment. The question remained, echoing in every corner of the world, what would come next? The world held its collective breath as the hours stretched into days. The alien ships remained suspended above the Earth's atmosphere, like silent sentinels, their outlines flickering against the black void. Every attempt to communicate, to provoke a reaction, had failed. Military channels were flooded with static, and yet the transmission, mysterious, alien, impossible, still pulsed through every receiver that mattered. It was as if the signal had rewritten the rules of engagement, imposing a pause that humanity neither understood nor controlled. In the command center, the team worked around the clock, piecing together every fragment of data. The leader's eyes, weary but unrelenting, traced the patterns across the monitors. They weren't random. The sequence in the transmission had repetitions, pauses, and rhythms that suggested intelligence far beyond human calculation. And yet there was something almost familiar about it, a resonance that stirred memories of long-lost myths, ancient mathematics, and the most primal sense of connection to the cosmos. One of the analysts whispered that it felt like the universe itself was speaking directly to them, and for a moment the room fell silent. No one argued. No one spoke. The thought was too dangerous to voice aloud, too vast, too impossible. Outside, the cities were tense and restless. Air traffic was grounded, satellites remained dark, and news outlets scrambled to report on the pause that no one fully understood. Rumors spread as quickly as the emergency alerts, from alien sympathizers claiming the visitors were benevolent, to conspiracy theorists warning that this was a trap, a test, or worse, a prelude to annihilation. People looked up at the night sky with a mixture of awe and dread, seeing the stars not as friends or guides, but as witnesses, judges, waiting for humanity to prove its worth. Children clutched their parents' hands, strangers whispered on crowded streets, and everywhere the tension was tangible, like electricity before a storm. Within the team, divisions began to emerge. Some insisted that the transmission was a warning, a subtle threat disguised as salvation. Others believed it was a chance, a lifeline sent either by an advanced species or something else entirely. Every theory carried weight, every hypothesis seemed plausible, and yet none could be proven. The leader, aware of the fragility of human decision-making under such stress, kept the team focused. They could not afford panic or distraction. They had to understand the signal before time or the alien fleets ran out. One scientist, specializing in exoplanetary signals, noticed a pattern that hinted at location. The transmission appeared to contain coordinates, but not coordinates in any system humanity had ever used. They were layered, multidimensional, almost fractal in nature, as if pointing to a place that existed in more than one dimension at once. When she voiced the discovery, the room went still. If her interpretation was correct, the transmission might not have just saved Earth, it might have been a map, a guide to something far larger than anyone had imagined. And if it was a map, the implications were staggering. Someone, or something, was inviting humanity to step beyond the confines of their solar system. Or perhaps it was daring them to trespass into territory that had always been off-limits. Meanwhile, communication with the alien ships remained impossible. Instruments that once measured energy output, propulsion, and material composition now reported only strange anomalies. Energy readings spiked and dropped without explanation, defying known physics. The ships seemed to observe, to calculate, to wait, as if aware that humans were studying them as intently as they were studying Earth. Even the most experienced military strategists admitted that the pause in aggression was unnatural. It was as if the aliens themselves had been stunned or restrained by the same force that had delivered the transmission. The leader began keeping a private log, recording observations that felt too sensitive for the group to discuss openly. Each entry detailed the subtle changes in the alien fleet, the inconsistencies in the transmission, and the mounting sense that humanity was not just being observed, it was being tested. He wrote about the feeling that the stars themselves were not just distant objects, but part of a network alive in ways humans could barely comprehend. And beneath every note, a gnawing fear. The transmission had halted the attack, yes, but it had not ended it. Something larger, something older than human civilization, was at work. In the quiet moments between analysis and speculation, the team began noticing patterns in their dreams. Some described hearing echoes of the transmission in their sleep, faint pulses that seemed to call, beckon, or warn. Others dreamed of distant worlds, of vast cities suspended in space, of beings whose shapes defied geometry and whose presence was both terrifying and beautiful. When they awoke, hearts pounding, they shared their experiences in hushed tones, unsure whether these visions were hallucinations or messages, hints encoded in the transmission itself. Outside the walls of the command center, the world continued to teeter on the edge of panic and awe. Every broadcast, every signal, every report seemed to confirm that nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had survived the first strike, but the victory felt hollow. The alien fleets lingered, patient and inscrutable. The stars themselves seemed restless, shimmering with an intelligence that was no longer passive. And deep in the heart of the transmission, somewhere in the complex weave of signals, lay a truth humanity had yet to grasp, one that could change the fate of Earth forever, for better or worse. No one could say what would happen when the pause ended. Would the fleets retreat, strike again, or vanish entirely? Would the transmission reveal its purpose or leave humanity to wonder at its meaning for all time? The questions hung in the air, heavy and urgent, as the world waited. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any telescope or signal, the unknown observers waited too, patient, unyielding, and silent, as the fate of a small blue planet teetered on the edge of something incomprehensibly vast. Time had stretched into an uneasy rhythm, with the alien fleets suspended above Earth like colossal, patient predators. Every day brought new data, new anomalies, and new fears. The team in the command center worked with relentless intensity, their minds stretched to the limit, analyzing the transmission for patterns that might reveal the next move. Every signal, every pulse seemed alive, as if it responded to human thought as much as it originated from somewhere deep in space. The tension was tangible, a pressure that pressed on the shoulders of everyone who dared to look up at the stars. The satellite team in the remote observatory reported a strange increase in gravitational fluctuations. At first, the data seemed almost insignificant, tiny ripples in the readings, but as the day wore on, the ripples grew into waves. Instruments went haywire, compasses spun without reason, and energy grids flickered under invisible forces. One technician muttered that the ships weren't just observing, they were testing the planet itself. The room fell silent. The possibility that the alien presence was affecting Earth directly made the looming threat feel more intimate, more urgent. Humanity's survival was no longer just about weapons or strategy, it was about understanding forces that defied physics and logic. Meanwhile, the psychological toll on the command team escalated. Dreams became more vivid, some members experiencing visions of worlds filled with impossible structures and beings made of pure energy. A mathematician on the team suggested that the visions were more than dreams, they might be encoded within the transmission itself, a way for the senders to communicate concepts that humans could not yet articulate. The notion was terrifying. If the transmission could influence perception, manipulate thoughts, or even predict actions, then every decision humanity made was being watched, measured, and potentially manipulated. Trust, once absolute among the team, began to fracture under the strain. Global tensions mirrored the uncertainty inside the command center. Military forces remained on high alert, yet there was hesitation in every order. No one could risk provoking the alien fleets, but standing idle felt like surrender. Diplomats attempted contact through experimental channels, broadcasting messages into the void, hoping for some recognition, some sign that communication was possible. Each message returned only silence, or at most, a faint distortion in the signal, like an echo that promised presence but no clarity. Rumors spread rapidly. Some claimed the transmission contained a key to survival, others feared it was a trap, a prelude to a strike more devastating than anyone could imagine. As hours turned into days, the alien ships began subtle movements, almost imperceptible, yet measurable against the backdrop of space. The satellites detected slight changes in energy fields surrounding the fleets, shifts in trajectory that hinted at calculation rather than randomness. Analysts pored over the data, trying to predict the implications, their screens alive with fractal patterns. waves of light and strange geometric codes that seemed to defy human understanding. The leader's voice, calm yet taut, reminded everyone that they were only seeing fragments. They did not know the full scope of what they faced, and every assumption carried risk. Then the transmission pulsed, differently sharper, more deliberate, almost urgent. The monitors flickered, and the room went quiet. Everyone felt it, a subtle vibration that wasn't just in the equipment but in the air itself, in the silence of anticipation. The patterns in the transmission shifted, as though trying to convey not just information but emotion, warning, or command. The team leaned in, analyzing each pulse, each subtle modulation, aware that the moment had arrived when every choice, every calculation could determine whether humanity remained safe or teetered on the brink. Meanwhile, on the streets below, society's tension became nearly unbearable. Citizens reported strange phenomena, lights flickering in sync with the transmission, electronic devices acting unpredictably, even strange animal behaviors. Some saw the sky shimmer, auroras of colors that should not have existed at those latitudes, painting the clouds with hues no human eye had catalogued. Panic and fascination mingled. People fled or froze in place, torn between the instinct to survive and the awe of witnessing a phenomenon beyond comprehension. Humanity was no longer simply observing the cosmos. It was a participant, subject to forces that could not be measured or controlled. Inside the command center, debates grew heated. Should they attempt to respond directly to the alien fleets using the patterns decoded from the transmission? Should they maintain caution, allowing the pause to continue, or take the risk of action to gain understanding? Each theory carried consequences. Each step felt like a gamble with the fate of billions. And with every passing hour, the subtle movements of the alien ships reminded them that time itself was running out. The most unnerving realization was creeping into every mind. The pause was not permanent. Something beyond human comprehension was waiting, calculating, and observing. And humanity's next move, every experiment, every thought, every instinct would be seen, measured, and weighed. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath, the night sky alive with anticipation, the stars themselves trembling with energy that no one could explain. The tension was unbearable. Every pulse of the transmission, every flicker of the alien fleets, every vision experienced by the team suggested that the moment of reckoning was near. Humanity had been given a reprieve, a glimpse into forces that dwarfed all human understanding, but that reprieve was fragile. Every calculation could tip the balance. Every observation could trigger consequences beyond imagination. And deep inside the signal, hidden among its impossible patterns, lay a secret that could determine whether the pause would end in salvation or annihilation. The world waited, and above it the alien fleets loomed, patient and inscrutable, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Every heartbeat, every pulse of data, every glance toward the heavens carried a single unspoken question. When the silence shattered, what would come next? Across the globe, strange anomalies began occurring simultaneously. Satellites drifted off course, electronics glitched in synchrony, and a few experimental communications attempting to reach the fleets were unexpectedly mirrored back not as words, but as fragments of distorted signals that resembled the very thoughts of those sending them. Panic intensified as people reported hearing faint echoes of their own inner monologues through devices, as if the transmission had found a way to reach them personally. Fear and confusion spiked worldwide, sending governments into further chaos. Humanity had survived the initial threat, yes, but now the rules of engagement were completely unknowable. Inside the command center, the team scrambled to adjust. One scientist suggested that the transmission might be trying to manipulate collective human behavior, shaping decisions and reactions on a massive scale. The implications were terrifying. If the signal could influence perception, cognition, and even emotions, then any attempt to act could be both predicted and countered by forces beyond comprehension. Strategies for survival, weapons deployment, even diplomacy were suddenly vulnerable to manipulation. The very concept of free will felt dangerously uncertain. Then came the most unnerving development yet. Among the signals intercepted, an unidentifiable sequence appeared to carry coordinates, but these were not for Earth or the known regions of space. They pointed to a location beyond the mapped universe, somewhere so distant and inaccessible that any attempt to reach it would be considered impossible by current human standards. The team debated endlessly whether the sequence was a map, a trap, or a message meant to lure them toward something unfathomable. One of the researchers whispered that it could be a challenge, a puzzle designed not for survival, but for comprehension. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. Meanwhile, a subset of the team noticed anomalies in the alien fleets themselves. Ships that had remained frozen for days now shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, their energy fields flaring in irregular bursts. It was as if the fleets were responding to the transmission in a way humans could barely detect. One analyst pointed out that these bursts mirrored patterns from the new signal another, indication that the transmission was not only alive but influencing everything it touched, including the alien forces. If true, the fleets were no longer a simple threat. They were part of the test, bound to rules humanity could not yet see. On the streets below, public unease reached new heights. People reported strange visual phenomena, skies flickering with strange lights, clouds forming geometric patterns, and auroras at latitudes that had never seen them. Reports came in from far-flung corners of the planet of animals behaving erratically, almost as if sensing the energy shifts in the environment. Some citizens claimed to hear the transmission itself, not through radios or satellites, but inside their own heads. Governments struggled to maintain order as panic and curiosity collided. Humanity was no longer merely a passive observer of the alien presence. It was now an active participant in forces that extended far beyond comprehension. Back in the command center, arguments flared. Some members pushed for cautious observation, convinced that any misstep could trigger an irreversible response. Others argued for bold action, attempting to decode the adaptive transmission in real time, even if it meant risking unknown consequences. The leader, weary but resolute, reminded them that time was slipping away. The alien fleets were no longer frozen in place. They were shifting, responding, anticipating. Every calculation had to account for the fact that the pause might end at any moment, and when it did, the consequences could be instantaneous and catastrophic. As the hours passed, the transmission pulsed again, this time producing patterns that the team had never seen. It seemed to target specific individuals, highlighting areas of the command center. Personal devices, even the subconscious responses of each analyst. The room filled with tension so thick it felt physical. Every heartbeat, every glance at the monitors, every subtle movement could be part of the transmission's influence. It was no longer just a message, it was a presence, almost like a force of nature, testing humanity's comprehension, patience, and resilience. And then, the final unsettling revelation came. Fragments of the new signal appeared to correspond not to Earth, not to the alien fleets, but to future event sequences of outcomes that had yet to happen. Every pulse seemed predictive, as though the transmission could see potential futures and respond to them in real time. The team stared at the monitors in disbelief. If the transmission could anticipate actions before they occurred, then humanity's next moves were no longer secret, and survival strategies could be rendered obsolete before execution. The stakes had shifted. Humanity had survived the initial strike and endured the pause, but now the rules were unrecognizable. The transmission was no longer just a lifeline, it was a test, a puzzle, and a warning all at once. The alien fleets, the anomalies, the visions, the predictive pulses, everything converged toward an impending moment that none could predict. The world below held its breath. The command center teetered on the edge of revelation and disaster, and the stars themselves seemed alive with anticipation, waiting to see if humanity could meet the challenge or fall before it. Time was running out, and the question lingered like a shadow over every mind. How would humanity respond when the next pulse came? And more importantly, what did the transmission truly want? The moment arrived with a sudden intensity that left the world holding its breath. The alien fleets, which had hovered like silent watchers for weeks, now began moving in synchronized arcs, their energy fields flaring in patterns that mirrored the transmission itself. The command center buzzed with urgency as monitors lit up with readings that defied every known law of physics. Every analyst, every scientist, every leader felt the gravity of the instant. This was no longer a pause. This was the reckoning. The transmission pulsed one final time, a rapid, complex sequence that filled every receiver simultaneously. The team realized it was no longer just communication, it was a code, a set of instructions encoded in energy and frequency. Working together, they translated the sequence, discovering that it provided a way to neutralize the alien fleets, but only if executed perfectly. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a harmonic resonance, designed to align with the energy fields of the ships, effectively putting them into stasis or even disrupting their propulsion systems entirely. The stakes were higher than ever. One miscalculation and humanity could trigger the fleet's destructive capabilities instead. As the team prepared to execute the plan, the air outside the command center seemed to vibrate. Across the planet, similar energy readings spiked, confirming that the transmission was not Earth-specific. It connected the planet, the aliens, and something far beyond the immediate solar system. Everyone realized that humanity was not merely defending itself. It was part of a universal equation, an experiment in survival, comprehension, and adaptability. Every second counted. The team synchronized their devices to emit the harmonic resonance, following the precise sequence extracted from the transmission. At first, nothing happened. The alien fleets glided in the void, indifferent, and the energy fields continued to flicker erratically. Panic began to creep in, fingers hovered over controls, minds raced. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ship's movements began to falter. Energy flares dimmed, oscillations slowed, and the fleets appeared to enter a suspended state, not aggressive, not attacking, but locked in a delicate balance. The tension in the command center shifted, a fragile relief washing over the team. Humanity had survived the brink. As the hours passed, analysts noticed an astonishing phenomenon. The transmission's predictive sequences began aligning perfectly with human actions. It was no longer just a set of instructions. It was guiding them, leading them to synchronize with forces far beyond comprehension. The fleets remained neutralized, and energy anomalies on Earth gradually stabilized. Across the world, the skies cleared of strange lights, electronic disturbances ceased, and people slowly emerged from fear-induced paralysis. It felt like humanity had earned a reprieve not through force or strategy, but through comprehension, unity, and trust in the intelligence that had intervened. Yet, just as the relief began to settle, a new realization struck. The transmission carried one final message hidden beneath layers of complex coding. A warning. Humanity had not been the target of destruction alone. Earth had been the first, a test. The fleets, the anomalies, the predictive pulses, they were a prelude to a larger observation, a galactic evaluation of civilizations capable of understanding and responding to the unknown. Somewhere, far beyond the known stars, other worlds were being watched, tested, and judged in the same way. The realization was staggering. Survival was not a one-time victory. It was an ongoing challenge, part of a cosmic network that measured intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. Then the twist came. In the final moments, as the team attempted to document every detail of the transmission and the alien fleet's response, a subtle, almost imperceptible pulse emerged within the signal. It was different from anything before, faint, deliberate, and targeted. It appeared to emanate from Earth itself, as if the planet had become a node in a network that extended far beyond human comprehension. The team stared at the monitors in disbelief. The transmission had not only saved them, it had integrated humanity into a system they could barely understand. Earth was no longer a passive planet. It had become active in the cosmic machinery, a participant in forces and events that stretched across galaxies. The team experienced a mixture of awe and terror. They had survived the attack, neutralized the fleets, and unlocked the secrets of the transmission, but now they were part of something infinitely larger, a web of observation and influence that could not be ignored. The stars, once distant and silent, seemed to hum with recognition as if acknowledging Earth's new role. Humanity's perspective had shifted irrevocably. The universe was no longer just a backdrop for survival. It was alive, interactive, and deeply aware. In the aftermath, the fleets remained suspended, not as aggressors but as observers, their presence a constant reminder that humanity had passed the first test, but that the future still hung in balance. Across the planet, the public marveled, speculated, and feared what might come next. For the team in the command center, every heartbeat was a reminder that comprehension alone had saved them, but knowledge, insight, and vigilance would be required forever. And in the deepest currents of the final signal, one last pulse emerged, brief, almost playful, almost teasing. It wasn't a threat, nor a message, nor a solution. It was a question. The universe had granted humanity a reprieve, but what would they do with it? The stars themselves seemed to lean closer, waiting for the answer. Humanity had survived the attack, but the game had only begun. The world exhaled in relief, though the calm was far from complete. The alien fleets remained in orbit, inert yet unmistakably present, a constant reminder that humanity had narrowly escaped annihilation. Across the planet, people stepped out into skies that glimmered with familiar stars, once a source of distant wonder, now a symbol of survival and vigilance. In every city, town, and village, conversations circled around the same questions. What had saved them? Who or what had sent the transmission? And, most importantly, what came next? Inside the command center, the team began the painstaking process of cataloging every detail of the event. Every pulse of the transmission, every energy fluctuation from the fleets, every anomaly on Earth was recorded and analyzed. Patterns emerged, offering hints not only about the alien technology, but also about the broader cosmic network humanity had unwittingly joined. The harmonic resonance that had neutralized the fleets was now understood as more than a weapon. It was a bridge, a key to interacting with forces far beyond human comprehension. Researchers realized that survival had not been about brute force or luck. It had been about understanding, adaptation, and the willingness to learn. The satellite observatories confirmed that the energy anomalies had subsided. Gravitational distortions, electromagnetic fluctuations, and unexpected auroras gradually returned to normal. Yet even as Earth systems stabilized, subtle traces of the transmission persisted. Devices occasionally picked up faint, regular pulses, harmless yet unmistakable, a reminder that humanity was now part of a greater structure, connected in ways that could not yet be fully explained. The planet itself had become a node in an intelligent, responsive network that spanned the stars. People who had reported dreams, visions, and psychic impressions during the crisis found those experiences lingering like echoes of the transmission within their own consciousness. Some described seeing fragments of other worlds, civilizations that had passed similar trials in energy forms that defied human understanding. These visions sparked a new era of curiosity. Across the globe, scientists, philosophers, and ordinary citizens began asking questions not only about survival, but about what it meant to exist in a universe alive with awareness. The crisis had ended, but the thirst for understanding had only begun. Political and military leaders slowly regained composure, acknowledging the limitations of traditional power. Armies, weapons, and fleets had played no role in the final outcome. Humanity's victory was intellectual and collective, reliant on the ability to perceive, interpret, and act in harmony with something far greater than themselves. For some, this was humbling. For others, it was exhilarating. Across nations, collaboration replaced suspicion, at least for a time, as humanity collectively faced the realization that survival in the cosmos required unity as much as courage. The alien fleets, still suspended above the planet, eventually shifted slightly, rearranging themselves into formations that resembled patterns in the original transmission. No attack followed, no aggression, only observation. Humanity had passed the first trial, but the fleet's presence reminded everyone that Earth was now part of a larger game, one with rules that remained invisible. And while the fleets posed no immediate threat, their silent vigilance ensured that complacency would never be an option. Humanity had been given a second chance, but it was clear that the universe would continue to test those who wished to thrive among the stars. In the days that followed, the public grappled with what had occurred. Some embraced hope, seeing the transmission as evidence that intelligent life could offer guidance and even protection. Others remained skeptical, convinced that the pause and the fleets were merely the beginning of an even greater challenge. Humanity collectively came to understand that knowledge, adaptability, and unity were the tools that would determine its future. Fear had been a teacher, the transmission an unlikely mentor. Amid the broader recovery, the team in the command center quietly reflected on what had been learned. They had seen humanity tested under pressure, watched the world struggle with fear and uncertainty, and experienced firsthand the limits of perception and comprehension. They had also seen the strength of collaboration, the power of curiosity, and the importance of measured, thoughtful action. The story of survival was not just about technology or strategy, it was about humanity itself, its resilience, its ingenuity, and its willingness to reach beyond the known. As night fell across Earth, the stars shone brightly, distant yet intimate. Children looked up with wonder, adults with contemplation. The skies were no longer simply decoration, they were a presence, a reminder that humanity had survived the first trial and was now part of something vast, intelligent, and unknowable. The alien fleets remained, not as conquerors, but as guardians of a challenge that would continue to unfold over time. And somewhere, in the deep reaches of space, the transmission pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging humanity's achievement. It was not a signal of safety, nor a promise of victory. It was a call to remain vigilant, to continue learning, to understand that survival was only the first step. Humanity had passed the test, but the universe remained alive, listening and watching. Earth had survived, the fleets were still out there, and the stars, for all their beauty and mystery, were no longer silent. Humanity had learned its place among them, and the story of survival, curiosity, and resilience had only just begun.